Good morning, all. Is someone here from Cape Coral? I know Mayor Gunther couldn't be here, but he said he was going to send somebody from Cape Coral to represent Cape Coral. Want to come on up? Don't want to put you on the spot, Chief, but I guess I just did. Apologize in advance. The mayor had called me last night and indicated he couldn't be here, but a representative from Cape Coral was going to be here, so we won't bite, I promise. And Matt's on his way, so he'll be a little bit late. Good morning, all. It's August 25th. The Recovery Task Force meeting will convene. If we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Just from a fluid point of view, I'm going to ask the task force, is everyone okay if we just move the minutes up and deal with that? And then we can get into some of my opening remarks, the county manager, and then get into the meeting. It just seems like it's a little bit out of order. Does anyone have a problem with us just taking
No, I would make that motion to move those minutes up and approve motion and approve minutes.
a motion, a second? Any discussion? Any objection? Thanks. Let's go to the minutes. Anybody have any comments, any changes, alterations, additions, subtractions? Seeing none, can I entertain a motion?
Move those again.
I have a motion, I have a second. Thank you. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thanks. I just think it's important. The county commission had a workshop basically to bring all the county commissioners up to date on the recovery task force. It was a pretty productive meeting. If you had an opportunity to be there was many people from the branches and from the community. And obviously it was very clear the county commissioners want to continue to be as engaged as they possibly can be. And as a result, staff's going to be much more engaged in this process. What I heard at the meeting is everything's going to be status quo, and staff's going to certainly just have a much more active role. Not that they weren't active before, but even more active. If I've said anything incorrectly, I'm going to hand it over to Dave Hardner, our county manager, and he can go from there. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today. We just want to acknowledge that there has been a lot of great work that's gone forth with the task force, the branches. And we want to dispel any rumors that are out there. We're not here to change any of that. We're not there. We're not here to ignore or push our will. That's not what we're here to do. I think what we want to do is we want to just ensure that unincorporated Lee County is represented. Other than that, I think the work that has taken place has been some really good work. And to that, today, as we progress through this meeting, I think one of the things we want to get across is what the initiatives that many of you put forward, we're not here to change those. We're not here to hamper that in any way. I think what we want to do is ensure that each stakeholder has their plan in place and that their governing body or entity would approve that plan ultimately for their community. And that Lee County would do the same. And with that, there's a lot of connectivity with these plans. And we want to ensure that that connectivity is there. We want to make sure we work very close with the city of Bonito on flood mitigation. We want that to be represented in both of those plans. There is a lot of connectivity, but there's a lot of individual components that people need and want, and we want to ensure that they have that. Our ultimate goal here is to ensure that each stakeholder, whoever that may be, municipality or otherwise, has their plan. They move forward and they approve that plan. The board will do the same, and then ultimately the board would accept the plan, so that each entity has their own component that they can move forward with. So I hope this helps a little bit with what we were asked to do and what we were tasked to do. Again, I just want to reiterate, the county has no intention of taking this over or changing the goals and initiatives that you've put forward. That's important to you, and we agree wholeheartedly. It's just important that we are able to work collectively, that unincorporated Lee County is included in that as well. So the board gave us direction. We are going to the board with those specific topics that I just mentioned, how we're going to move forward. We're going to go to the board to codify that on the 5th. Nothing's different. And I have the blue sheet here with me today if you'd like to see it, but that's really how we're moving forward, is to be a part of this, to be more a part of this, I should say, and to work collectively with all of you. So, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Questions?
Yes, thank you for being here. And I think, I think there has been some confusion. We have been putting in a lot of time, effort, all of our municipalities here. And as I said in the last meeting, there seem to be two separate tracks. Let's put the 1.1 billion aside. I think that kind of gets in, not in the way, but I think this task force was not formed based on a particular grant that was been given, but since that one came so quickly, it has been somewhat of a focus, certainly for all of us, and rightfully so. But we know that number we certainly hope is going to climb. I think my comments, my concern is these two paths continue to work together, and this is a separate entity. I think you made a comment there that is the first time I've heard that, because when I originally came on the task force, we talked about individual action plans for each of the stakeholders, whether it's a municipality, whether it's an organization, because our long-term recovery, we're looking at our future here. And Ian has defined that we have a new future to look at, all of us. And so I did ask, we were starting not our own action plan, but then it was stated, well, no, it's going to be a collaborative plan, that it will be one plan. But now you're saying that we're going to have possibly some subtitles under there for each of the municipalities or organizations that are here around the table, or others that might come to the table, that can say, how can we all do better? How can we all learn going forward as a unified front? And there are things that we might agree or disagree on, and we don't have to agree to everything on the master plan, but we want to make sure that our own plans are considered as we move forward, because that's going to have an impact on the dollars that come, how they're distributed, and where they're distributed. So just making sure we're going to continue with this format separately.
Sure.
Um,
And I'll chime in after you.
Okay. There is a lot of connectivity with this plan, and I think, and I'm not speaking for Hagerty, and I'm going to let them discuss this as they move forward. But I believe there is a lot of connectivity. We need to ensure that we're connected. But there's also individual components to each stakeholder that they're going to want to address. I think our board was very clear at the workshop that they want the municipalities and stakeholders to be able to do that without the county being the shadow over it. Ultimately, if the board was left to approve a plan that encompassed your needs, but the board may not, to your point, may not agree, it wouldn't be fair for the board to have to be put in that position, or the municipality or stakeholder to be put in that position. So ultimately, we would like to ensure each of the stakeholders are able to move forward with what they want, that again, the county is able to be more involved, and that ultimately we have this overarching plan that connects all of us for the greater good. So I hope I answered that question.
You did. May I follow up, Chair? I think that you had just noted the date of September 5th. We had a council meeting last week, and our date that we had on our agenda was September 19th. So we have our meeting on August 29th, and that's when we're supposed to give feedback, substantive feedback, to come back. And I'm very concerned between the 29th and the 5th, with other items coming forward on the 5th. I want to make sure that our stakeholders and the input that we give is going to be vetted thoroughly and embedded in that plan or conversation. The city of Sanibel, unfortunately, has not had the one-on-one.
Mhm.
I hope that we're able to do that. I know there was some time. I have reached out. I think, I don't know if anyone else around the table has not had their one-on-one yet, but that's vitally important for us to have that one-on-one, to give that feedback in time. But I am concerned of the short turnaround time. I want to make sure what we say, what we have input, is listened to.
On the input, are you talking task force input, or are you talking CDBGR?
Well, we're having a meeting on the 29th here. The county is coming to give input, And we would just want to make sure,
For
I think it's
CDBG.
yes.
Okay.
So I want to make sure that we have the time and what is given in that meeting. That's a very quick turnaround to
Yeah.
have it looked at and put in place.
Yeah, thank you. And you did mention that to me before we started, and I do have clarity. The 5th is to bring and summarize the information that was provided to us. The 19th is still in play for us to have the board approve it and move it on. So exactly what you were told. The 5th is just a summary for our board to understand all the information that's coming in.
Okay, and hopefully ours can be compiled to that point or might be a little bit later. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
No problem. I mean, I appreciate the comments. Any other comments? I don't want to go until I've heard others. Anyone else?
Chair,
Yes.
I just want to say that the one-on-one, definitely you want to do that. That was very informative and really helped. And I'm sure the others that have had it to know where your plan is and everything. So I've tried to get that done ASAP.
David?
Are we still on track for our timeline with regards to getting this collated to where we can present it to the county commissioner? Because we were at one point, we were supposed to have a 3-hour meeting today to really dig deep and chew on that bone. And now I feel like we're.
I'll answer, and Dave, feel free to ad lib. It was very apparent in the scheduling that we were going to potentially have not only a need for a long meeting today, but certainly maybe even an additional meeting in September, October. Okay. Branches were certainly working overtime. And one of the county commissioners asked a great question: what's magical about December 5th? Is that cast in stone? And with the anxiety of making sure we stay on track, but we certainly have ample time to do what we need to do. So as one person's opinion, I'd like to make sure it's comprehensive. And if we need a little bit more time, not that I'm looking for more time, but if we do, it's not a deadline like we have with HUD. It's not a deadline where we have a specific timeline. I think everybody wants to get to the end, but if we're a couple of weeks, a month, I don't think that's going to be problematic. We want to try to stay on time as best we can. And I think we'll adjust as accordingly. Did I cover all the?
Yeah, yes. To the commissioner's point, we know your time is valuable. We know December 5th was the scheduled date. We haven't obviously addressed it with you, but trying to keep it within that time frame, potentially maybe December 19th, we would have a board meeting. We could bring it back then. That would make up for some of the delay that we've had now. But to the commissioner's point, we just want to get it right. And so if the 19th doesn't work, we'll adjust accordingly as long as it works for everyone. So we're not making that ultimate decision.
I just want to add a comment, and if I could, John, and I'll go to you next. From someone that's been involved in the process, I want to make sure that all the hard work that everyone's done, we incorporate. And to me, there's been anxiety when HUD gives us the registry letter and we have 90 days and then we have a 30-day, input. And there's just a timeline where this is a self-imposed one, and I get we want to do it, but I also have heard from many people, everybody's working really, really, really hard. And what happens if? And, that's where I just think it's always best to be inclusive. And if that means we need to adjust, and if it's 2 weeks, so be it. If it's a little bit longer, so be it. That's just my view, and I'm not necessarily speaking on behalf of the commissioners. That's just my point of view. I think that's where we are. John.
So when we first started this, I thought there was a hard line that by the end of December that HUD required us to have our plan well established at that point. So is that date still in effect? And if so, I'm a little concerned about delaying activity now and then try to compress it into, if not the 5th, the 19th. It seems like if that date's still rigid, am I correct in that regard or not?
I think there's two components here. What we're talking about is the plan for the long-term recovery plan. That's one piece that doesn't have to be the 5th or the 19th. It's CDBGR that has to be submitted. And what I was talking to with Councilman Smith was that CDBGR plan we have to submit by the 19th of September.
Okay.
I'll follow up. So yeah, what I thought certainly is where I thought this recovery group, because when we thought about this, we didn't envision that we're going to get a block grant of $1.1 billion. And quite frankly, I'll be disappointed if that doesn't have another zero on it. So, but that's just what I've always said from day one to the secretary through. But that is separate. This task force came together as a body. This task force came together and came up with branches. We all were very intimately involved in appointing people to this and making sure it was the community, because as elected officials and people that we represent the community. It's their recovery. All we have the luxury of doing is being involved and assisting them in recovering from a category 5 that no one even dreamed of that would be here. So that's my focus. The only other point that I will try to make sure is I want to see every entity, whether it's fire, police, the municipalities, the school board, the health board, you all make sure your projects are in. I think the challenge we're going to have is if there's an intersect where there's a county piece, a municipality piece, and they might cross over where they have to somewhat speak combined and or incorporated or integrated. That is my biggest concern. Yes, Chris.
Yeah, we had our one-on-one late last month, or early this month, I can't remember, three weeks ago or so. And we identified 11 projects that had not made the list, and we submitted those, but we've never got confirmation back that they've been added in. It's a clerical thing, I know, but is there a way that we can follow up on that?
This is specific to CDBGDR
Uh,
or overall task force?
Overall task force.
I'm going to ask Harrison to answer that question.
Sure. Hi. Yes, we have integrated those projects, and we'll give you the confirmation of that. But thank you for pointing that out, and we did add those.
Any other? Yes.
Yeah, and a follow-up, I think it's going to be extremely important. I know that we've all probably emailed separately, and to just have that collaboration on what has been provided by each of the stakeholders and bring it back to us so we can verify that it's been accurately reported and recorded. That would be extremely helpful for all of us. And to David Collins' comment, in regards to what this meeting was supposed to be, I'm glad that we're going to have another one, because I think all of the stakeholders around this table and in the audience also wanted to have a drill down so we would fully understand where we are individually, where we think that we're all going. So we're ready when it goes to the county to say, yeah, we understand this and we're working towards this goal. So I think there's, I think the confusion is being lifted a little bit. And I think moving forward to just make sure that we don't have that confusion going forward on what we're presenting, how it's being used, whether it's for our particular plan or whether it's for the CBDG-DR money as well. I think there's just things are starting. It looks like they're going to intersect a little bit better. And I think that's probably going to create more clarity for all of us in this process.
Let me just reassure everyone as a county commissioner, the goal has always been to help have Lee County recover as a region. I will certainly make sure and give you assurances for people that know me. I will do everything and work with staff to make sure this stays on track. This plan is exactly what we want to do. This needs to recover. I think staff being involved to the degree they are is going to be helpful. I just want to give people some relief of any anxiety that we're not going to achieve the overall goal of helping us expedite and identify what we need to do to help us recover. And that's my task, and we'll continue to do that. Is that accurate? Yes. Okay. So hopefully to some degree, as I've kind of used in my golf days, maybe this is a mulligan for today. And we have an opportunity to continue to make sure we work. We all know each other. No one's really shy. You're not sitting at this table because you don't have your ideas. And I respect not only the members on this, but all the branch people, because your insight is essential. And I have the luxury of representing this community, and I'm here, whether you're a nonprofit, whether you're a business, whether you're a church, whatever you are, whatever component you are for this community, we want to make sure we help you recover. And recovery is here. The block grant is here. They will intersect and hopefully address items that we didn't envision, and we make Lee County a much better place. And it's really going to be our responsibility to make sure we advocate for when we have that dialogue back and forth with HUD, that they understand they missed the unmet need by a mile. Yes, sir.
I agree with everything you said. I think this whole group has had a focus for all of Lee County, not just our own initiatives, because if one fails, I think we all fail, especially along, where the devastation has been. That's where the economic driver of this whole community is, that we need to make sure there's sufficient funds wherever they come from to get back on our feet in there. My only concern, and I may have misunderstood the process going forward. We've been working as a group for months now, and now the county is going to make sure that the unincorporated areas are represented. Hopefully we've addressed that in our process. I think that we have. But it's my understanding of the process here was that we were, as a task force, we're going to bring all the recommendations to the council as a single entity with some recommendations. And what I'm concerned about is if the county has a separate initiative, will that be interfolded? And will we be able to look at those county initiatives as a task force and be able to prioritize those appropriately based on maybe some unidentified needs?
Yes. We don't see it as separate. We see it as being included in the overall process. So I think the important part is what we want to convey. And I think throughout today, Haggerty, we'll introduce them in a minute, will be able to walk through the next steps and how we're going to do this so that we can show that ultimately there is a lot of, again, the connectivity, this component, it's all going to come back to this task force like originally designed. It's just to ensure that each stakeholder, whatever is specific to their needs, they're able to do that. If it was a plan that was going to go forward to our board, and our board was ultimately required to approve that document, there may be some initiatives that did not meet our board or potentially a council or any other stakeholders' needs or wants or direction that they've provided. And we want, through this process, and as we talk through with Haggerty, we just want to ensure that everybody is able to include the components that are very vital to them to move forward, but also ensure that we're connected in the process when we do it. So that's the ultimate goal. We don't want to change the process. The process is the process.
Well, I think we all realize that the funding that we've visualized today is not going to be sufficient to meet all the needs that have been identified out there. So there is going to be a point where hopefully this council and this task force can look at all of those, and we will recommend a priority, what we think are the most important for all of Lee County. And that does mean, in my mind, there's going to be some initiatives from Estero and probably Fort Myers and the like that aren't going to be met immediately, because we want to take and get as much money as we can as soon as possible so that we can start the resiliency effort of really making something happen as opposed to talking about it. So not all the needs are going to be met initially, but I think we all know that this is not a one-year project. It's a long-term project. So what that organization looks like going forward, we've got to be flexible enough to look at that. But we're kind of in the initial stages, and I want to make sure that we all have an equal opportunity to make sure that the most relevant items are funded appropriately and first.
Let me try to bring this back to a committee that some of you serve on. Let's for a moment think we're the TDC, okay? And inside that, we have entertainment, beach and shorelines. They're going to be projects that the subcommittee and the advisory committee is what we are. We're going to submit those, okay? And ultimately, that goes to TDC, it ultimately goes to the county. I don't envision this process to be much different than that. I think what this process has enabled us to do is identify just the ample and abundant funding sources that are available and potentially say, okay, this is a water quality project. Not just go to the state, but by the way, go to the U.S. agriculture area. I think we'll continue to work collaboratively that way. And I continue to want to make sure we look at the master plan and the HUD dollars as separate. They'll intersect at some point in time. They'll come across with our infrastructure and items, but there are going to be core needs in our master plan that we need to do so. And I think it's important this group continues to give the best advice as an advisory board to the county commissioners and make sure we work as collaboratively in collaboration to make sure we achieve that goal. And that's probably the closest analogy I can say, because having sat on the beach and shoreline for many years, the subcommittee, we recommended what we recommended. It went to the TDC, it went to the Board of County Commissioners. It was for the betterment of the community. This is a regional effort, and I believe in my heart this will be a regional effort that's best for the region. The county just needs to make sure we're heard, and what we don't want to do is submit a plan where we have somehow missed our opportunity as well in some of the areas of Pine Island, Lehigh Acres, Captiva, and make sure they cross over. Sanibel's initiative might trigger something where we say, oh, we should do this. Okay. We're working on a water quality project. What do we need to do to work collaboratively together to have, an opportunity to hook up to the Donex plan? Or what do we do to be in Fort Myers Beach? Those are the types of things I think we'll have an opportunity to do. Hopefully that clarifies it, but rest assured, I've met with Dave, I've met with Chris. We're here to try to make sure we do this. And when we submit the plan, whether it's December 5th, December 19th, it's inclusive enough that we don't reject the plan and we didn't miss something. So let's just continue to have faith in the process that we have. We're all here to help the community, and let's just do the best we possibly can and move forward for today. I have the utmost respect for all of you. And if we go off course, I'm sure you'll remind us that we're off course. Is that fair? Sure, absolutely.
I just want to make another statement is I think it's important to know that you were correct. You are an advisory committee and you're going to submit a list of projects. What I don't want to get lost in this is you're going to submit it. I don't want it just to be you're going to submit it to the county for approval. And I think that's the important part that we're trying to bring forward is that each of you have your initiatives as a stakeholder. And we want to make sure that, yes, you're going to ultimately submit it to the county to accept that plan, but it allows you, if for whatever reason the stakeholder does not agree, which you always don't agree with your advisory committees, it allows you to pick and choose what are your priorities, and you can continue to push those priorities however you see fit and not rely on the county. And our board was very clear that they wanted to ensure that the stakeholders had their ability to do that. And so that's really what's important for us to get across today.
Just to follow up with John, I think you made a great point. Although we are the advisory, we all have our separate plans. And I know Fort Myers Beach has presented a plan. We just had our meeting the other day in support of that. And we are, we might not have a full agreement on everything, but we stand behind them. And I think that's what we need to do for all of our municipalities. I know each of us should be and are working on as we look at the draft action plan on where we fit into all of that. And I think it's going to be important for all of us to submit this back to this task force so you all can see what we're looking at, so we can see what you're looking at, because I think, like you said, it's got to work both ways. We've got to support the county. We've got to support each other's municipalities and back. Because I think for us as a region, the more we're unified with each other's needs, might not be 100%, the more we're probably going to get that money coming back, because we can sign on to things and say, we've read this and we support this in this avenue. So I think that's going to be a task that we all need to make sure that we're accountable to ourselves for and accountable to the task force. One question I do have on process, and I know we're going to be speaking to that, is this has been facilitated through the collaboratory. We do not have the collaboratory here at the table right now. Is that something that is going to change? I think my understanding from the genesis of this is it was going to be a third-party independent that we could all come and talk to in a different way of, Kevin, you're representing the BOCC, so Lee County is represented here, every municipality. So how is that working in the process? Because I think there does need to be some clarity on that to understand that, because I know there are a number of people that have been confused on that part of the process as well. Can you speak to that to us?
Sure. Sorry, you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm great.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sure, I'm going to let Haggerty discuss that. But for us, again, we don't want to change anything. We just want to make sure that we can include the unincorporated portions of Lee County. There are a lot of projects. As we go through the initiatives, there are a lot of discussions that there are already plans when you talk about global things like public safety, transportation. There's a lot of components that are overarching that we can probably provide, and we want to make sure that those documents are included. Because those are things that are typically when the road network, the major portion of it is the county responsibility. Public safety, a good portion of it is the county responsibility. EM, specific to the emergency management component, is county responsibility. But we want to make sure that that's included, that some of those documents already exist that were being asked for. So we want to include that. We just want to make sure that that's all encompassing. Plus the municipalities have their own, and other stakeholders have their own documents that probably need to be pulled into this. And that's what we discussed with Haggerty. Again, we don't want to change anything. We want Haggerty and their team, because the collaboratory is their team. However they want to move forward, we are good with. So that's a collection, a conversation that they're going to work through. And I do want to say, I'm very sorry I didn't announce myself. I'm Dave Harner, the county manager, and I forgot to announce Chris Brady, assistant county manager, who's over emergency management and is also going to be heavily involved in this process as we move forward, as well as a number of our team members. So I apologize for not announcing that. And if I may, Mr. Chair, if I can turn it over to Haggerty.
Mhm.
Okay, I'd just like to introduce our Haggerty partners that are here today. First off, we have Tracy Phillips. She's a senior subject matter advisor. And we also have Harrison Newton, our project lead. So I'm going to turn it over to Tracy. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I've met some of you in some of the one-on-ones and the branch meetings, but not as many as Harrison has attended with you guys. We'll become more familiar faces with you. At this moment in time, we're going through a shift as well, just because that's where we are in the process. And we've got a lot of valuable information. The branches and the working groups that have put forward everything that are going to be the bones of your long-term recovery plan. We're now synthesizing that information all the way from the priority level down to the project level. So my background is in long-term recovery. I joined Haggerty about 6 months ago, coming from FEMA as a long-term recovery director for Hurricane Harvey in Texas. I've worked every long-term recovery office since World Trade Center. So I've got lots of background on best practices, what finalizing plans look like, which ones are successful, and the best way for us to coordinate and kind of use all of the valuable information and the input that we've received from all of you and turn that into something that's not just adopted and approved, but that's meaningful and usable, and looking for all the funding sources to help you guys get to where you want to go. So that's why I've been brought in at this moment in time, along with the fact that the project lead, Tanya Shannon from Haggerty, is taking paternity leave and is no longer able to travel. So Harrison has been involved in this process, working with all of you since virtually the beginning of the process. I came in about a month or so, and I've mainly been listening up until now to see where you guys are and how I can best help inform what the final plan looks like. I think that's my value added to the team. So Harrison and I have worked the last couple of days in putting together the slide deck today to kind of walk you through where we are in the process right now and what the last quarter of this year will look like, and how everything that you guys have brought to bear, your comments so far. I would welcome you to ask Harrison any questions, or me, as we move forward, that's process-based, because this is where the rubber meets the road, right? All the good input is great, but if it's not actionable and if we can't help you bring that to fruition, we don't want your time to have been wasted. So that's where we are right now, and that's how we're going to move forward. The question regarding Collaboratory, they are an extremely valuable partner, teaming partner with Hagerty. They have been from the beginning. We could not have gotten to this point without them. They're going to continue to work with us and be a part of this process moving forward. We're getting, in the next week to 2 weeks, you will see us framing up roles and responsibilities on our team based on our delivery schedule, making an effective end date in December that not only meets the mark on the schedule, but makes it meaningful, the final deliverable. So that's what you'll see us doing. And as we come in the next couple of weeks, you'll hear more from us about what the team looks like, roles and responsibilities, Collaboratory, and Hagerty as we move forward working closely with you. So we look forward to it. And Harrison, you want to take it away?
Sure. So I'm going to take a moment to take to the podium here. So I just want to reiterate that it has been an honor to work on this project. It's been an intense and quick moving process, but we know that we're now kind of reaching an inflection point, because we're moving from a point where we've been working very hard with you to work with community partners, stakeholders, the public in a number of different ways to cull together an understanding of the impacts of the storm and the nature of what this community defines as resilience and recovery. And so in doing that, we're now pivoting toward actual technical construction of a plan. And so this is a different moment. We're actually needing to kind of talk at a different level of specificity, and we're needing to be able to understand what has come before in terms of investments that have been made by your communities, strategic priorities that have been identified by your communities, what other plans in the past have raised up in terms of projects and prioritization, and really pulling that together in a technical way to a plan that can take the next smart step for this community. So wanting to align just for a moment on what is this plan meant to achieve. I think our time is short now. So we're introducing this. We certainly can continue to talk about this into the future. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the process that has been and what the process looks like as we see it going forward. So if a recovery, long-term recovery and resilience plan, and from the beginning, this has been termed and framed as a moment where we're creating a plan at a strategic level that establishes a comprehensive strategy detailing the actions, resources, and processes needed to recover from Hurricane Ian and fully recover community life through a regional approach. That speaks to the common stake that a lot of you talked about this morning. Each of you represent different areas with different community concerns that are very specific. But also what's incredible, I think, about this particular community is you all recognize there is a common stake. There are things that you share in common, and there's power when you act collectively. So the plan needs to do both of those at once. It needs to provide the common platform for the whole, for how the whole community seeks, sustains, and coordinates delivery of long-term recovery resources. The seeks and sustains piece is so important. This is not going to be the only storm or disaster that occurs in the next 5 years. This plan, in the life of this plan, very soon there will be a new disaster. There will be another recovery. There will be disasters of different kinds, storms of different kinds. And as you raise up projects and responses to those, this plan would hopefully achieve a strategic frame to fit those new ideas and those projects within. So it's very important that this plan be framed at a strategic level, but also integrates the specific. And it's of course meant to help the Lee County area work across the jurisdictions and sectors to optimize resources. We're going to touch on that in a moment. But I think one thing that Hagerty has seen in the last several years is resources at a level that is really historic and maybe once in a generation, and that pursuing those resources often requires joint action because the decision makers around those resources want to understand that it's a wise investment and want to understand that the money that they're putting forward is supporting some sort of a unified vision that's going to have a big approach. So those are some of the things that we point out. Are there things that this body wants to point out, it's now or later, that you would think of as being key and important to the plan that we're developing? We'd love to hear that, take that into our thinking. So that can either be now or later. Want to pause here, please.
Chair, are you asking that as a question?
Yes, I
For something
am.
that needs to be added to the plan?
I'm asking if there's a perspective on what the plan is meant to achieve that you'd like to voice now.
I would.
Please.
And I will forward my email to you and to Tracy. Tracy, it's nice to meet you, and to the chair as well, because I'd like it to be distributed to all of the participants. I think that there's a critical aspect that we're missing, and that is our economic revitalization. I think when we're looking at the disaster that we've faced, or when we say recover from Hurricane Ian, I would respectfully say recover from Hurricane Ian or any subsequent weather events that we have, because I think this plan is not only, it's looking at Ian, but we're going to be having these again. It might not be Sanibel or Fort Myers Beach that's hit. It might be Estero. It might be, some other areas, and we have all got to make sure we're running to them. But I think there are ways that we can incorporate that. I do have some of the draft action language. I will not read it all to you. I don't want to bore you with that. But I think that it has missed this very important segment, that when we look at Lee County and the areas that have been hit, those are our tourist-based industries, and that brings a lot to Lee County in so many different ways. And so there are ways to incorporate, and there's proof that these have been incorporated in prior storms, and I have access to those as well. And also, we can look at their examples of the CBDG DR funds that were successfully used. We're going to have to bring up the waivers. When we look at the waiver program, we just had our meeting this last week regarding for our city council talking about waivers. Well, we've learned that you can get waivers. It is not as difficult, and there is precedent to show that those that are most critically impacted are the areas that can have a waiver, or there's even language that can go around a waiver, because this economic revitalization really is the future of all of our Lee County right now, and it needs to go to those areas that were devastated. I know we're on two separate tracks, but I am going to go to the 1.1 billion. When Secretary Todman came on March 15th, they came because of the devastation that Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel faced. And those are, again, economic drivers. We have workforce that goes from the other areas to Fort Myers Beach, to Sanibel, to Pine Island, to Mount Lachey, insert there. So I think this is a very important, critically important part that should be added in. It has not been added in. We have economic recovery, housing, things of that nature. But I will forward this all to you. But I would say this is a strong must-have, and it's a critically important basis of why we're even here today.
Great. So to that, I would just say that, we'll work on the language here to make sure that that's clear. I think that the process that we've been engaged in bears out that there is a strong component of this work that looks at the economic recovery piece, and even really just the heart of what is the economy, the regional economy that everyone is taking part in here. But I agree with you completely that is a huge piece of what the recovery is. And it's a huge actual part of resilience as well. So we actually haven't had the one-on-one with Sanibel. But we are going to have that one-on-one. We've had a one-on-one with, I think, almost with the rest of the team. But in that one-on-one, we'll make sure to bring to you the emerging initiatives that are around the economic piece, because I think that those really speak to exactly what you're talking about. So quickly, I want to go over the schedule and even just what we've been doing in the frame of the plan we want to develop. We began this process with the formation of this body, the formation of 8 branches that are divided by sector, health, housing, economic recovery, cultural resources. Those mirror the reports of support, recovery support functions on the National Disaster Recovery Framework. Those 8 bodies were meant to create a platform for stakeholders of different types to come together and study, learn about, share the impact of the storm, but also give a regional understanding of the importance of what needed to be achieved in those areas. Those groups have been meeting monthly to do that work, twice a month to meet to do that work. We then created some coordination around research and context so that we really wanted to understand at a deep level what was the impact of Hurricane Ian on the community in all of the ways that would matter, to Holly's point, even the economic piece. And a high-level plans analysis in which we reviewed the many plans in this environment to understand at a high level how they play into and support what were emerging priorities that this body ratified. We then worked to support those priorities with technical briefs, which were just a way to say that we looked across the research and understanding of some of the areas that were identified as priorities to even have a moment where we could help inform the branches as to what could be achieved there that would be supportive of recovery and resilience. We did 14 workshops with the branches, national experts, and government officials from across all the cities and the county to understand what would be, how can we answer the very complicated questions around issues and issue areas where there's an understanding there's a need for advancement, but maybe we don't quite have a pathway. We did community engagement with 17 town halls across all the communities, a very robust, involvement in a survey we issued. And then, I think what we've been really grateful for is your time and sitting down with you in the last few weeks in one-on-one sessions where we've been able to show you the emerging initiatives, represents hundreds of pages of work, to really go through those with you and your executive teams one by one and talk about and hear your reactions and collect that feedback. So I wanted to go over that really quickly because I wanted to kind of level set on what this process has been and what it's meant to achieve. If this weren't a complex moment, we wouldn't have had to go through all that to make sure that we heard community, that we convened community, that we heard from stakeholders, and that we had a process that included them being engaged in a meaningful way in the production of a plan. And that is really what we've been steering toward. So the one-on-ones that we had with you were meant to collect and understand your thinking about what would be the most powerful actions we need to take, what would be the limiting principles that you think need to be employed so that the plan works for your communities. And so we expect to finish that. And I think that really frames well what we are hoping to do with the county administration as well. It really makes perfect sense that in having sat down with each of you and your teams, that we would now pivot and have a moment to sit down with the many teams that work at the county who really have technical expertise, but also understand where a lot of current investments have been made. We want to make sure that the plan is raising up the very smartest actions that we can take, that they're not just general ideas, but that they actually come related to things that have happened before, related to what plans have set out, that it's interactive. Because you can imagine that this is an emerging narrative that this plan is going to play a role in, and we want that to be the right one. So just then lastly, I would point out that because there have been concerns about who's had entry into this process. We had the moment in which the RTF directly received submissions of projects, all the municipalities and everyone were able to submit those. And so we've collected those and you've seen those in this process. We had the branch submissions, which the branches were able, and all the team at the branch level were able to input and submit to us specific ideas for projects, specific ideas for initiatives. We've had the workshops and we collected those ideas where emergent from what officials and government officials and SMEs suggested, we were able to capture those. And we had the town hall submissions directly from the public. All of that has been filtered through the branches and their process. And all of that is coming up to that orange box there, which is the strategic alignment of initiatives. That's the piece where we're hearing from you what you believe is right about the emerging ideas, what you think needs to be added to those emerging ideas, and how we can really make sure that going forward, as we continue the process to these, what the branches are going to submit to this body, that it works for your communities and it works for a plan. So that is, at a high level, the process we've been engaged in and what it is to achieve. In that, very quickly, there's a couple of definitions. We call it a long-term recovery and resilience plan. We understand the recovery piece and how what we're doing interacts with that. As I said, the branches are designed in line with the National Disaster Recovery Framework. That's why we, have a process that works that way. And we also understand that recovery focuses at a few funding streams, which we've talked about. But in this moment, and we'll talk about resilience, the resilience component, there are larger buckets of funding that potentially could be achieved. And of course, the aspect that any recovery occurs in a short, intermediate, and long term. And we expect the lifetime of this plan to address projects that may take 5 to 8 years to achieve. The resilience component of the plan, and communities sometimes struggle with the definition of resilience. It's community specific. What we've heard from the branches, what we've heard from the public, what we've heard from those around this table is a definition that Hagerty really is trying to catalyze here. That is at the top of the screen there. The ability of individuals, institutions, businesses, and systems within the community to withstand and recover, no matter the disruptions or disasters experienced. So we're really talking about a level of resilience that means investments that are being made, mean that next storm, Holly, to your point again, that next storm, that next event, that next pandemic, whatever that next disaster is, this area is better able to be responsive and reactive and recover from that kind of event. The first bullet is the one I'll focus on the most. There are many hundreds of millions, billions of dollars available now in this environment around resilience. And that money, that opportunity really does represent a once in a generation opportunity to work together to bring those dollars to bear into this moment. One of the questions that the chairman asked early on in this process, what are you willing to do for resiliency? And we wanted to frame that question again to you to remind that these were the things that really came out of that conversation, and they represent the process we've been engaged in. Doing something for resiliency as a community, I think has meant what are you willing to do collectively to come together? And these are some of the points that represent what you said and the interpretation of this into the process we've been in.
Harrison, if I could just add right here to your comments, Mr. McLean and Holly. I'm sorry, I can't see the name tags very well. When we're talking about leverage innovation and identified best practices, what both of you identified early on in the questions that you had speak about, I think Holly, yours in particular spoke to resilience. What you're asking that language to be identified in that first slide as to the purpose and intent of the plan and capturing the rest of that speaks to the resilience, not just recovery from Ian. And the other thing I wanted to say is I don't want us to get stuck on just the CDBG DR dollars. So what we have been doing in the background and the part of this moment of pause, we have a team working on the background to synthesize what you've given us so far. And we're leveraging some of our other teams and information that we have regarding these billions of dollars in IIJA funding and the different, and we'll have an example of that later on. We're doing a crosswalk for you to help you. Sir, you were talking about how you're going to prioritize your projects and what funding may or may not be available. Obviously, one of the critical features of prioritizing is, can we get the funding for it? Do we already have it identified? Where will it come from? And that sort of thing. So we're going to provide you with a tool that crosswalks those available pots of money. And that's a part of what we're working on right now to provide you with. It's just a part of the background information so that when you prioritize projects and in the final version of the plan, you get those projects that feed into and support the initiatives and priorities appropriately. If that makes, so that's how this fits in with that from the very beginning.
And to just follow up on both points, I think intuitively we understand inside the branch the economic component. We do under natural resources, beach tree nourishment. That obviously is a component to economic recovery. I think if we just in the overlay stress the economic recovery, because economic recovery not only addresses the particular project, but also the resiliency, because both require that. So I think it's really important to lead with economic recovery, and because we assume and come to the conclusion in many of the branches. But I think if we and have it as an overlay and really lead with that, it speaks volumes for what we're trying to do. I think we say it, but it's construed, not necessarily just out.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I just setting expectations here, some of the best plans I've ever seen, it took us 3 or 4 iterations to get there.
Sure.
So we're going to start outlining but it's yours. And we want to make sure that those priorities are set in the overlay and the big picture, as well as those sections that we're talking about, for different entities and all of that.
Great.
So we'll propose probably several different versions along the way and see which one works better. But yes, the overlay of like overall planning capacity and economic development that touches every entity that's here makes a lot of sense.
Thanks, Tracy.
Chair, just real quick.
Yes.
I would just one thing that really comes in my mind is the timing of this, because I know when you say, 5 to 8 years, a lot of economic recovery on our island means that existing businesses will not last for 5 to 8 years waiting for some kind of aid to help them along. It'd be a whole different, it would be new businesses. People can't afford to pay mortgages on buildings and employees for 5 to 8 years without having some kind of help with that. I would like to just support what Holly and others have said, that we've all come up with lists early on with the portal. It was scattered. Everybody and their brother could submit things. Some clarity on what the vision of what you think our municipalities are asking, but also the ability to compare notes in an open forum with other entities at the table to look for synergy and look for and just frankly ideas about how we can work together and make it better as a whole.
I mean, I think that's a great point. I think the reality, I haven't studied more plans than I'd like to admit, is the capacity, we're only going to go so far with the state. And unfortunately, we're going to rely on the federal government, and you're going to go through 26 different entities. That's just a process that unfortunately doesn't move. We're all sitting here almost a year to the event, and we can't even get a disaster loss determined, which would give an economic stimulant to this economy that no one could really fathom. It's mind-boggling what that would do to this if it was passed. And it's the longest period of time from an event history where it's taken a year and there doesn't seem to be any clarity at all. So I appreciate everything you're saying. I think Tracy's trying to set a conservative estimate. We're all going to push. And I know everyone in this never really is a patient person. So I'm confident that we'll achieve that quicker than 5 to 8 years. But I think it's important that we have our challenges. And the only way we're going to do that is if we collectively do that. We have to make that happen. But we're up against, a different process. I mean, I can tell you from a county point of view, waiting the frustration to open a park where people are waiting because FEMA didn't inspect it. I'm like, and again, simple things that had zero cost until it was inspected. I couldn't do anything. It's a frustrating process, but unfortunately, when you have a storm that's $113 billion and climbing, you need Big Brother to help. That's the trade-off.
And there is kind of just a bit of a separation there with kind of the reality, because it's been 11 months. I'm living in a trailer. We just got our town hall torn down because of delays, and it should be simple things. But the reality is that you have these people with businesses, and every month they're writing a check. It's taking into their savings if they have it. Time is of the essence for most of this, for the people who are dealing with the greatest loss.
Agree.
Okay. Any other thoughts about the process so far or the objectives of the plan?
Chair?
Yes.
The only question I would have is, with whatever framework you might have started to put together, the earlier we see it, the better we're going to be able to prepare and discuss it. And we realize it's going to be an evolutionary process. But like I said, we would certainly appreciate getting that information out to us sooner for us all to be able to digest and give good feedback in the upcoming meetings.
We'll work real hard with the pivoting that we did. The slide deck that's up there on the board, I literally just received this morning. You'll receive it. I'd like you all to think about it, read it. If there's any input, come on. But we'll do the best we can to make sure you get the information as early as possible. I can tell you that Dave apologized profusely for me receiving this when he walked in my office. So, but there's been a lot of change, and we're trying to make sure we get this plan right, and not only for you all, but for us as a region, and to make sure Lee County and unincorporated are covered. So by all means, when you get the deck, if you have any comments, feel free to email. We want to hear your voice. Thank you.
And I'll just follow that up to say that we are taking a hard look at this process. It is complicated. There are a lot of moving parts, but because of the inflection point that we're at, we agree that it's important for you and your teams to have a lot of time to kind of look at and react to information you're receiving. So that's becoming a greater priority for us is to make sure we're kind of working in a way that you and your teams have time. So just want to say that we hear that and have it as a priority of ours.
And Harrison, one more thing to that. So we've gotten lots of great feedback in this last round and I want to make sure that I point to what you're seeing right now. So what we've been working on in the branches is those initiative profiles that we've built that map it to the projects that get that initiative done. And so all of that language that you're seeing, you'll see in the actual plans, right? So this is us. We are sharing with you guys, and we probably haven't communicated it as strongly as we should have, but we developed that profile in a way for you guys to provide feedback with the QR codes and doing all of that. That's helping us develop the plan. That language in there and us asking you for comments is extremely important because this is your plan. So right now, the bones of the plan, the organizational structure, we haven't decided what the first version will look like, but the bones of it, you guys have right now in those initiatives and the way that those have been explained, right?
I think it's just important for the public to understand that the projects that we all put forward from the public and from all the entities are greatly going to exceed the HUD grant. Like you said, you'd like to see another zero on there. It may be 2 zeros on there. So there, and you've mentioned all the other silos of money, and the public needs to know, and we need to, as a group, realize that we can't get all the projects that we submitted. I mean, it can't happen until out of the initial HUD grant. I hate to say this, but $1 billion in this particular case is not much money. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but there's so much that needs to be done.
I guess I vision, even before the $1 billion was talked about, identifying just every source that was available to us, and how do we go and achieve the greatest recovery and the greatest, actual opportunity to collect that grant, those dollars that are necessary. I think that's going to be the key. And I really want to separate the two. I think the housing component is so used with infrastructure, but when I look inside the branches, there's so many other parts of this. So they do intertwine with one another, but they're two separate situations. I think it's really important for us to stay focused and continue to do that. And I think having an expert like Hagerty's gone through storms, they could indicate, I didn't even think of United States Department of Agriculture to go for sewer funding. It just didn't come up on my radar. That would be an avenue to go to. And yet that was identified, sat in, and certainly know that as a source. I think as we understand the different entities and what they potentially offer us, will give us that opportunity So whether it's the block grant money or other monies, I think there's great opportunities. We've just really gone to the state, when you think about it, and achieved money in so many ways that people can't appreciate what the state just did this last go around. Because needs like debris and food we didn't even think of, or rent reimbursement and things of that you don't really have an appreciation unless you're that person waiting for that. I can tell you, as one county commissioner, I had great anxiety at the 75th day thinking about potentially billing the taxpayers of Lee County some ungodly amount of money for debris reimbursement. I mean, when you think about if the state didn't pick up our 12.5%, the dollars that we have done in collecting all debris, we would have had a levy to you. That number, honestly, just for a moment, think about it. It's mind-boggling. Just, we'll work together. What I hope to do is identify those sources with Hagerty so we understand. I think collectively, as a body, we can really look at those entities and say, okay, what's the project look like? And look at, okay, great, this went in there. What avenues do we have? How do we work together? And I think collectively, that's why I like this group. We could talk outside together. And I know that people here are going to walk the hallway up in the federal government, and we're going to advocate for this community. It's what we're going to do. But that's the way I envision it. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and I think you stated just what I was going to speak to. The 1.1 billion. Let's just put that aside. I mean, that's one avenue, and we can't keep just focused on that because it's going to be so much more. And let's remember, when you spoke to what we need now, you know, we as each municipality are working with the legislature, we're going to go to the state, go to whatever funding sources that we have available. This money we're not going to see this for a while. So we can't think that this is the magic bullet that we're going to get immediately. And I think, Tracy, what you had said about what we have, I want to be careful because I'm not sure what we have. And I think that might be a great opportunity for another workshop is, you know, you've met with the other stakeholders, you're going to be meeting with the city of Sanibel. Maybe at that point, a comprehensive report is sent out to us so we understand what the input of everyone. I don't know what Benita has put in particularly, and they don't know what we're looking at. So I want to be careful to make an assumption of what we have or don't have. I think we're starting a different chapter today. So I think we've got great opportunity to make sure that we're all on each other's page in understanding the needs of everyone. And Armin, to your point, you know, how many zeros are going to come on to that? There's going to be a lot, but it's also going to be a very long-term project recovery for when those dollars actually do get to us, the ones out of certain funding. And I'm really excited to know of these additional funding sources. We're all looking for those independently, but I'm sure your wealth of information is going to bring other opportunities that we might not really know that's out there yet.
Yes, and I appreciate that very much. I think so what the commissioner and what Dave has said is very important. This is the plan that we will deliver in December is intended to be your roadmap.
Mhm.
And to your point, Mr. Veach, that you know, that 5 to 8 years, that is just the life cycle of long-term recovery in a massive catastrophic event like this. Unfortunately, that's just the reality. That's something we don't have control over. This plan will be, we've got to draw a box around it with what we can provide and provide successfully, but it's intended to be a roadmap for what your opportunities are, what your priorities are, what you want to achieve, so that that can become a living document. And, you know, after we go away and the plan is hopefully adopted, that gives you guys, you know, a plan for the future.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I like the idea of you developing this plan, but what is missing for me, I believe, is I'd like to have this group take a look at that draft plan. Maybe it's finalized, but you talked about the more times we look at it, the better it gets. Before that goes up for decision-making at county level, I'd like this group to have a look at that roadmap.
Yeah.
And that timing is getting pretty critical for us, that we get a chance collectively to say, yeah, we agree with the plan, or no, we need to modify X, Y, and Z on it. So is there a
Absolutely. And
time?
I apologize. I've gotten a little bit ahead of the, we have, the plan is not developed yet. We have the elements of the plan. So the first version of it is not even developed yet. So you guys will see it immediately as we start to version it. We have not collected all of the information from all of you yet. We're still in that process. So I'll hand it back over to Harrison for him to take it to next steps.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think
Uh-huh.
that's exactly right. We, in this process, having talked with all of you on these one-on-ones, collected, as you know, a great deal of information from you and your executive teams. We are pivoting to a moment where we're doing that with the county. There's a lot to collect there too. We will think about how to collate and make sense of that information so that the body can collectively look at that and understand it and see how it may be impacting what is then therefore moving forward. But this process from here till December 5th or the end date will be about this body deciding and constructing the plan that moves forward. So next steps, we did want to point out that we have the community priorities. They led to the workshops. They led to the branch deliberations. They led to the one-on-ones that we were just talking about and still finishing. And the next step in that process is really the one-on-one with the county. And in this case, the county has many different teams. So we're making sure to do that work with different teams at the county. It hits on the exact points we've been talking about today. Across sectors and silos, we're looking to increase community political and financial support and resources by ensuring that we galvanize these initiatives in the frame of what actions and activities and investments are active. And so learning that from you, learning that from the county has been key. One thing that we always come back to is we want the desirable, viable, and feasible pathways forward in each approach. So that's a lens that we want to together apply to the work. There is a lot of activity that could happen, but we also want to make sure that we understand what's desirable in your communities, what's viable, what's feasible, what are the right pathways for work to happen. And really also, and I think this came up in the one-on-ones with you, we want to identify opportunities because a lot of you know about and have had creative or innovative ideas in your communities that really should be reflected in this plan, where we've identified a priority or a need or a gap, but really you already have a solution or a solution that if it was upgraded could be perhaps a solution for even at a larger scale. So we really want and always want to hear about those innovations or ideas that you believe in or find effective. And in this work, one thing that I think we wanted to just begin to signal is that we have 8 branches and they roughly correspond to important sectors of community life and action. But one thing that we're seeing emerge is that we're likely not to create a plan that simply is within the silos that we commonly see. Where housing is dealt with separately from economy, which is dealt with separately than health, and separately dealt with natural resources. But rather, there are smart connections between these things, and interactions between these things that are beginning to emerge, that are unique to this community. And so we want to begin to just talk about and have you be thinking about in your back pocket, what are the connections that you think speak to large visions that might actually be the chapters of this plan, that might be different than just talking about information in the siloed form that we started in, because we understand usually that the silos are problems or issues where we want to break those down, understand interrelations, and then work together across those boundaries. So looking for opportunities to do that and frame a whole community plan that also does that is, I think, an emergent piece for us. So just wanted to call that out. I want to be respectful of time because I believe we're over time. So really quickly then we'll end with touching on the point on funding, because we really wanted to bring to life for you today a key element of the reality of the environment we're in on resourcing. It's just different than any other time. We have the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Consolidated Appropriations Act, and Florida state grant programs. Oftentimes they're being funded through those prior 3 acts. There are numerous opportunities for entities in a community to actually look for funding to achieve resilient outcomes. There are numerous opportunities for cities within a county or the county and its jurisdictions in its area to work together to pursue funding streams. These funding streams are very real. They speak precisely to a lot of the things we've talked about today. They are broadly framed and they deal with both recovery and resilience priorities, and they deeply align to the branch priorities that we've begun to identify. We're doing work to do the mapping, and so we look forward to sharing that with you. This really kind of just speaks to, I think, what I just shared. So for time's sake, I'm going to move quickly. What it can look like to go after funding like this. We wanted to just kind of show you that, the orange box there is what we're doing. We're conducting a need and opportunity matching currently. But after that, there can be an assessment of internal capacity and available resources, prioritizing those matched opportunities to figure out which are the ones you may collectively want to go after, identifying the stakeholders and partners that could be a part of an application or a move for increased resources in an area. This is all work that is very important for a community to begin to scope and engage in, because there's so much resource out there that could be had. And as an example, and it really is rolling out over time. Wish it was all happening at once, but it's rolling out over time. Here's an opportunity we've just become aware of. We brought a couple to, I think, one of the RTF meetings of the recent past. It's around a piece of funding called RAISE Discretionary Grant Program, the Rebuilding American Infrastructure and Sustainability and Equity Program. Essentially, this is a funding stream, offers funding for projects and planning efforts that seek to rebuild local transportation infrastructure. An applicant may submit up to 3 projects for consideration of up to $25 million, so on and so forth. So this is an opportunity that just came online. Absolutely, it's the kind of opportunity that one or more municipality or the county could go for together. Regional approaches are preferred. And so this is a way to think constructively about if there are things in the plan. We've all agreed that 1.1 billion only scratches the surface. Some of the work, if, tactically, this can be an input into the funding, that saves the dollars from the 1.1 billion potentially to be used in some other fashion strategically. So just wanted to bring to life the kinds of opportunities that are there and what it looks like to kind of go after them. And then to make sure that you understand we're doing the work of looking at the initiatives you're raising up and what are the opportunities. We want to provide that to you as part of this process.
Chris, sure.
This whole process reminds me of what we're doing is a bottoms-up kind of approach to solving the resiliency problem. We're taking all the input from the municipalities and the organizations within the county as to their needs, and we're trying to build up to a connected plan to go forward. But what I think we're sort of missing is a top-down approach, which says, what are the funding sources? What are the requirements to get those funds? How do we go about getting the money? If I was God in doing this, the first thing I would look at is where's the money and how do I get it? And what do I got to do to get it? Now, I know that's frustrating. You look at how to recover from flood insurance claims, and we still have thousands of people that are trying to collect flood insurance money. Dealing with the federal government in some of these areas is going to be frustrating. And it's going to get to your point on Fort Myers Beach about how quickly you need the funds. I think we need to focus in this area. We need to figure out who we need to hire for lobbyists. We need who we find as subject matter experts to get the Department of Agriculture funds that Kevin talked about, or how to get these discretionary RAISE program grant dollars. To me, that's what's missing from what we're doing. We need to figure out where the dollars are, and we need to figure out how to go get them and map it from those source dollars down to what we're building here as a bottom-up connectivity program to make sure that we're got some handle that we're able to control the process of getting the dollars. I mean, if we don't get any dollars, all this is for naught.
Yeah,
So I would encourage us to think about identifying those funding sources and figuring out how to go get it.
This is a great opportunity that's in front of us that regionally will have a greater chance for succeeding. We failed initially because this was, too early in the process as a county. So we need to do a more regional approach. I understand what you're saying, Chris. I think until we identify the projects, I don't know how we turn the Haggerty to say, okay, it's a sewer project. What entity do we go to? We need to identify the projects,
Well,
and then we can match the projects on what the funding sources. I'm not saying your approach, you could do them both ways, but I don't know what need I would have. It's from Department of Commerce unless they said it's these 5 projects.
But my point, Kevin, is you don't know what kind of sewer projects that the Department of Agriculture is going to fund until you sit down with the Department of Agriculture and say, what is it that you're looking for to fund to meet your objectives?
But I think, at least from what I understood thus far is the 26 entities, you're not going to find many where you're going to cross over 2 or 3 or 4 different federal entities or within the federal government to try to get funding for sewer. It's a Department of Agriculture. You're not going to go to 2 or 3. It's going to be in that area. And I just think allow Haggerty the opportunity to look at that. And from that, we can start to have more basic conversations. I think the list we all agree is needed. And I think we could work on that top down, bottom up. I think as long as we understand the opportunities collectively, we're
I'm
much
not
better off.
disagreeing with anything
Yeah.
we've done.
No.
Well, and if I could, I'm so glad you asked that question just that way and made that comment, because I think it's important for us to understand the plan we're developing now is at the strategy level. That's what you guys have been asked for. And we're bringing it down to that project level and simply identifying those projects and creating kind of that crosswalk in funding opportunities at the project level. What you're referring to is an implementation plan that would come next after you make those decisions about what you want to move forward. So I think the two can work together. I think you do the strategy first. That's how I think you guys will be more successful, which is this plan at the strategy level. And then once you make some of those decisions based on what you see the funding opportunities are, whether it's bottom up or top down, you can develop an implementation plan either way. But I think that's a next step after this plan.
Thanks.
And maybe a final point on that as we move toward the conclusion. I think one of the things, the strategic frame that we have and the profiles that you've started to see come together, one of the things that represents is a lot of work that was done by the branches to talk about and understand from a research level, what was the impact of the storm? What are the opportunities for resilience? Those strategic priorities that you ratified were not chosen, arbitrarily. They reflected debate and discussion from those that work in the branches to really understand, well, what does need to be achieved? What is important? So that there, in some ways, Councilman, I think what you're talking about, a top-down looking look, part of that we can help determine a lens for that by understanding what is even the community need. What does the community need? So we know the universe of things we should be looking at. Oftentimes it's larger than we think. And I think that is kind of what we're experiencing, is that there's actually a lot out there that speaks directly to the things that happened during the storm, happened during other disasters, and are relevant. So we are over time. Our way forward, we know that we're going to continue to work to kind of collect the incoming feedback that we've received. We're going to be working with the county to do that. We're really kind of developing the tactical pieces of that process. So we'll be informing you as that rolls out, but we're going to need to do it quickly. We're going to move quickly to achieve that objective. We intend to work and show and reflect to you the feedback that we've received and our plan to integrate it. We expect to have 2 RTF meetings right now, currently scheduled for September, in which we'll be working to smartly share that information with you and discuss that information. And I think that we'll be framing those meetings with a lot of need to have interaction and conversation we've had today, which I think, was very effective. So this is what the calendar looks like. There's 2 Fridays in September currently, and then we have straight on till December RTF meetings. Okay.
There's a need to, and Councilwoman Smith brought to our attention, the Horizon Council's annual meeting is the 27th. We need to move that date. I'd love to see it the 13th, but again, it can't be on the 27th.
October.
Correct.
Okay.
October. Yes. Sorry.
Thank you. And Chair?
Sure.
If I may, one conflict we're continuing to have is maybe even looking at those Horizon Council dates. Because like it fell today and you have very active participation throughout the branches that are torn. I know we did it for 10 o'clock, but those meetings do go till 10. So just something you might want to think about if we could engage, because there are some that had to leave Horizon Council, and that's an advisory committee to the BOCC as well. So maybe just look at some of those dates. We moved it from 9 to 10, which was helpful.
Okay.
But as we're getting some of this meat really,
Yeah.
getting the meat off the bone, they might want to be here to participate in this meeting as well.
Great. Thank you for that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair.
So with no further comments from the task force, we will,
I just have one final, and I'm sorry, this has been very helpful, but when you had, Tracy, when you'd indicated there was not a plan, is this plan, and again, I think this is some of the confusion, is this plan the same plan as the county's action plan? Because there has been a draft action plan that we spoke to. Are those 2 separate plans, or are they the same plan?
If you guys want to speak to, it's my understanding that, the county is a stakeholder, that they've got a dual role here, right? In the way that we're talking about, and this is in my head right now,
Okay.
but this is my understanding of the county's intent here, is to be the connective tissue in this overarching plan, right? For some county initiatives, along with some of the other entities that have your own set of priorities. And then the unincorporated Lee has projects of their own as an entity as well. So when we talk about the action plans, as the way that you're describing, I think that's what you're referring to as the action plans that we've been working on.
I am. There was a BOCC workshop, and there's an active plan, a draft plan, because we've been tailoring some of our comments based on that actual action plan. So what I'm trying to clarify is that the same action plan, or is there going to be a subsequent? You said that we haven't had a framework here for this plan. So again, a little confusion that I just need to clarify, and I promise that's my last comment, except for thank you.
So Dave, correct me if I'm wrong. The action plan is what we will do for the community development block grant. The master plan is what we put together as a community due December 5th. So there are 2 separate plans we are actually trying to follow. So that's, so there's a lot of deadlines associated with the HUD dollars and that. But the master plan is all collectively, the master plan allows us for each municipality to put together their thoughts, and that's where the crossover comes. The book that I was given second
Right.
day of the storm from Bay County said, here's my master plan. Didn't know what it was. That's what it is. So 2 separate action plan, master plan.
And some of the items, we can add still to each of them.
Absolutely.
And that, I think that's important, because there is a crossover, because part of our comments will be part of that economic revitalization.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
the action plan, just for everyone's edification, we will have a hard date, but as New York has really defined the word amendment, I don't even know what number amendment they're on, but it's way up there, and their funding dollars that they initially were awarded and what they received exponentially also changed. So there'll be more obviously in the future, but just to separate action, and that's where it becomes somewhat complicated with the HUD dollars. Action plan, master plan, there are 2 separate plans that obviously are going to intertwine to some degree, but let's just try to keep them separate.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. And with the last item being public comments, any public comments? Raise your hand.
Thank you. Stephanie Wardine for the record. Public comment, want to highlight for this group, for awareness, the long-term recovery group devoted to unmet needs exists outside of this structure. And there are funding mechanisms specific to LTRGs and a lot of regulation around that structure for resiliency, recovery, and still a little bit of response depending on where you live. Want to highlight that it is robust. There's a governing board, bylaws, and a complete disconnect from this work.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Marcia Ellis. And this was a very good meeting, and I feel like I have a lot more clarity from where we left off last time. And I'm happy to see that there is more of a nod or consideration given to the municipalities, because there was some confusion about that from earlier meetings. I know that Cape Coral had made an effort to try to get some of their long invested work enacted, and I'm glad to see that the opportunity for the municipalities and the stakeholders to come forward is being given. I want to talk just a little bit about the waivers, because I too have had some concerns as I've read through this plan. And I just want to say that understanding that process, I think, is important, because the capacity for recovery, I think, is a fundamental issue. And so some communities have more capacity for recovery than others. For instance, the capacity for recovery in Sanibel is very different than the capacity for recover for, say, Fort Myers. And I'll point out that the community rating system has Fort Myers at a 9, which is way too high. And that's the system that's set up to evaluate some of that resiliency capacity. And I just don't want to see that the recovery efforts in our communities brings in too many irresponsible urbanization practices that will create a future for other areas of the county to not have the resiliency that incorporates best planning and best practices, and that we spend too much time focusing on incentivizing and not enough time on reflecting, so that we don't bring in those elements that truly do lower our capacity to handle natural hazards in the future. I know that this is a generational amount of money coming into the community, and that we know now that natural disasters could strike just about anywhere. We could have had inland flooding like they did just north of here, and we would be talking a very different narrative. And I do see that looking at the capacity to be able to weather future storms is really central to the work, as specific as it is. Those that I see as an underlying and central principle. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Mine's going to be short and sweet. Fred Forbes, Benita Springs, alternate member of the task force. The comment that was made was 5 years. You got to think in terms, it's going to be longer than that. I was in a town that was literally half destroyed, every school destroyed, half the business community, about a third of the housing. And that took 10 years to get back to where they were something. And they're still not where they should be. So it's a hard pull. And the other thing you have to realize, every few months there's a natural disaster. The thing that happened in Hawaii, that's going to take money too. So we're all competing for the money. I think this is a great meeting. I think what's happened here is for the best. I support it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Craig Edwards from Promenade East in Fort Myers. I come here not as a shareholder, so to speak, but as a commoner. I'm a meteorologist for 50 years, and I served at one point as the director or coordinator of emergency management and communication, public safety in Indiana, deputy director for the Weather Service in Indianapolis, chief meteorologist for the Weather Service in the Twin Cities, meteorologist for Minnesota Public Radio, meteorologist for the Minnesota Twins. During that time, after retirement, I published a book called Nature's Messenger as we were approaching the Al Gore era of climate change awareness. And I heard twice in the last couple of months, after understanding that we were having meetings about moving forward with recovery, that I was surprised that we were already on hurricane season and we were still drafting a plan. When I worked for the Weather Service, my boss said on Monday, get it done by Friday, or I'll find somebody who can get it done by Friday. I heard twice, it says nobody could have expected a storm of this intensity. Now, I don't know where you all been, but there was a Hurricane Andrew a while ago, way back. There was a Hurricane Katrina. Since I've been here, there's been a Hurricane Irma and a Hurricane Ian come within 15 minutes of my house, the eye of the hurricane. So I just want to advise you that we can no longer say nobody could have expected. We didn't have a warning. And I want you to get your hands on that money as quick as you can before the next disaster occurs somewhere in this country, that we don't get our fair share. I agree that $1 billion is not going to be enough, but I encourage you not only to build back better, but to build back smarter. I know it's tough for government to do that, but I found it's best for local people to resolve their own local problems. The government is there with the money bag. Take advantage of it, put in permeable pavement, build for Category 5 hurricanes when you build back better, anticipate a rise in the sea level. People have heard that for 20 years. Even if it doesn't happen, you're prepared for it. So thank you for your work that you do. Public service is very underappreciated. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yes, and good morning. My name is Bob Soder. I'm with Florida Gulf Coast University and also a Master Gardener back to 2011. I put together just a small proposal that will be implemented over the next 2 months. And it's focused on two areas that I think we've touched on today, but perhaps are underrepresented. The title of the grant is to explore increasing Lee County tree canopy for two purposes. One, to reduce heat and eliminate some of the carbon dioxide. But secondly, to look at Kevin's concern, what is the return on investment of doing that relative to partnering with Mother Nature? We're unique in Florida because we've got two resources that have done years of research. University of Florida is our land grant college, and Florida Gulf Coast University, now only 26 years old, has amassed amazing amount of research relative to our needs here at the table today. I think Haverty's responsibility, if I may use the analogy, is a cross. The lateral branch of that cross, they're here to gather all of the data, to integrate it, and then the vertical, of course, is to bring it back to the county commissioners. But I just want you to be sensitive. I'm sorry to be late to the table in a sense, but if we ignore what Craig has talked about, and if we ignore all of the research already collected, I mean, there are books that are written on, literally the title is the 20 most hurricane-resistant trees to plant in Florida. We have every opportunity to strategically determine where to plant those trees, where to create those groves of shade, where to place the housing. If we're going to put $770 million in low-income housing, let's at least design the housing and match it with a landscape that is resilient and maximizes a partnership to reduce excessive heat. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Sophia Brubaker. I'm the Secretary of Sunshine Village, a 55 and older resident-owned and managed 50-year-old neighborhood in the heart of Iona. 200 homes, all of our homes were destroyed in the hurricane. Yesterday, Sunshine celebrated a milestone.
We held a ribbon cutting celebration for the first 2 sets of piers constructed to support the first 2 new homes being built to the new AE11 FEMA flood elevation code. Local builder Scott Allen from Iona is doing the construction. Thank you, Chairman Ruane, for sending your Executive Secretary Pamela to represent you yesterday. And thank you, School Board Chairman Persons, for attending as well. While our small community of seniors is working tirelessly to rebuild our neighborhood the right way and to rebuild our lives, we're concerned. We're concerned that Iona and consequently Sunshine have been left off of the final neighborhood plan list. We are the gateway to Sanibel Island. We are a distinct, historical, and important neighborhood within the unincorporated Lee County region. We are worthy of identification and help. Where do the seniors of Iona fall into these initiatives? Of the 5,000 homes destroyed in Lee County by Ian, the majority belong to the seniors of Iona, I speculate. Senior communities in Iona, such as Sunshine, provided a viable alternative to costly models such as Shell Point Retirement Community, our neighbor. Please add Iona back onto the neighborhood plan list. Why not build an 8-block region for seniors in Iona with a state-of-the-art senior citizen center at its core? Recently, Commissioner Sandali explained that there's a difference between affordable housing, think 70% of the grant that funnels through HUD, and housing that residents can afford. The seniors of Sunshine, like many of our senior neighbors in Iona, worked all of our lives to afford what we lost. We need the stakeholders to identify where the seniors of Iona fit into your roadmap, please, and thank you for all of your efforts on our behalf.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Can I call for an adjournment?
So moved.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.